to another call. So today I have with you another interesting twist. I think that's what it's all about, these episodes and these seasons, right? So today I have Micah Yott, and let me tell you about him. So apart from being an artist, writer, musician, speaker, and carpenter, he's also created a judgment-free space to share trauma with recovery techniques and guidance. This leads to a scholarship and membership of his nonprofit organization that's called All Range Combat. ARC, as he calls it, combats internal trauma and all ranges beyond ourselves using sound healing, group therapy, get this, martial arts, and weapons training. So I have invited him to come and join us today because we're going to speak on a way that he's including art, nature, and connection specifically for men. Micah, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, how first, when we first connected, I told you I love the fact that you don't only do it for men and women, but that your focus also is on men. Then you tell me all these things, and there's like martial art and weapons training, and then art and nature. And how did this all like actually come together for you this way?
Mm. Well, it's kind of a interesting story. So for the past, I would say, decade or so, I was creating a homestead to live off grid and kind of isolation because I've always been in isolation or kind of a hermit. But about a year and a half to 2 years ago, the marriage that I had that I was building fell apart, and I had to start over financially. So most people can understand that part. The
Mm-hmm.
interesting thing is, I had a choice on what to do with all of this pain I had to kind of process. And in my entire life, this has been the most challenging for me to process. And usually, when I face something that is challenging, I usually create something, art, some type of art, whether it's music or painting or drawing or anything. And this one was challenging because it was so much to process all at once. Uh, so I had to find everything I could do. So I created this process. I started writing down my process of what I was doing. And I was creating art every day. I was trying to connect with people. And since I wasn't going really anywhere, I was connecting through Zoom. And I was sitting with nature as much as possible. And these things were healing me as I processed the pain. And I've always loved martial arts ever since I was young. And I never really got too seriously into it. I just practiced certain things. And then this process kind of allowed me to let myself kind of dive into all types of martial arts and isolation. So that's what I focused on.
Okay. So when let's kind of break it down. When you say sitting with nature and nature, where did you go? Like what kind of nature?
I would go outside and sit in the woods
Okay.
and listen to the birds. I
Mm-hmm.
would watch bugs around me, like caterpillars, butterflies, dragonflies. I love dragonflies. I think they're beautiful. And yeah, just kind of absorb nature.
The reason I'm asking all these things, and I'm gonna keep because my head's like, and what about this? And what about this? And what about this? Usually for women, as you can tell, we're very talkative and chatty and blah, 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 blah. Men typically, for whatever reason, have a little bit of a harder time. For example, let's say just sitting in nature. The majority of the brain is always in active mode. And it's always like, why am I here? Why am I just spending time here? I should be doing something. I should be creating. I should be working. I should do. So how was that switch for you? I mean, I know you were in pain. I know you're trying to process, but what was that switch for you that said, I just need to sit in nature and look at this caterpillar for the next however long it takes for him to cross?
I think you're right. The mind, it was like it needed to do something. like nonstop. It was so overwhelming for me that if I wasn't being productive or active or striving to really rebuild my foundation, um, become another cog in some machine with another company, instead of investing in myself. And I feel like by sitting in nature, it allowed me to kind of shed that identity of needing to be productive in order to feel fulfilled.
And not just, I guess, fulfilled, but how do I say this? It's kind of like all of us, men and women, we construct this ego, right? We construct this personality, and that personality breaks. And like you just said, you were shedding that identity. It's okay, that broke, that shed. Who is this person now? Does that trigger the mind, or does that how does the mind process the fact that you're shedding its identity once it's stopped the yelling and the screaming and the self-sabotage and everything else that the mind does to us? How was that shift for you?
It feels, if I can kind of sum it up, it kind of feels like you're losing your mind, that you don't really understand what reality is anymore. And then once you get through that, everything is clear.
Nice. Nice. Okay. So let's talk about the people that you help. Let's say the men. How do you typically approach them, or how do they approach you? Is it an easy conversation? Is it people that were coming in at the same level as you, as in, I'm already here? Or there's some people are like, okay, I've heard about this and this is cool what you're doing. I'm just interested. Like, what's the percentage, I guess?
So with my experience, it usually it has to be very delicate. Um, and on top of that, most men will shy away from the idea of even talking about pain and trauma.
Right.
So um, they'll be interested in the idea, but they will be very timid to even attempt. So usually they'll just listen for the most part on the outskirts, not really connect till they're absolutely ready.
Squirrel moment. I'm thinking, can't we just like push them in there? Because it's
Yeah,
everybody has to be ready.
yeah.
But again, I think what do you think? I think it's cultural, I think it's societal, I think it's everything that the men typically hold back, even though they know they need this, even though they're looking from the outskirts, like you say, like from the outside, and like this sounds interesting, but they don't take that step.
Yeah.
Why do you think that happens? That as a tendency, men typically take much longer if and when they actually seek for help.
I feel like it is a part of our culture or our society to kind of program us at a young age to kind of idealize being emotionless and not needing any type of help, which this idea is ridiculous. But nonetheless, it's still there. The program is. So it creates the suffering for men, uh, self-sabotage, as you put it. It's absolutely accurate. The sad part is, even if men are aware that they're doing this, they don't have the trust in themselves or in someone else to handle being vulnerable and
Mhm.
sharing that fear with somebody.
Right. And I'm writing it down because I think for all of us, it's not easy to be vulnerable. But I think especially for men, because yeah, since little boys or whatever, you've been taught that the man of the house and the man's the warrior and the man's the breadwinner and like blah, 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 like all these things to toughen you up. But we're all human. We all have issues. We all have emotions. And we all have a lovely, beautiful mind that talks crap to us when things are going right. And it's no different. That's why, again, I wanted to bring you on the show because I do facilitate women's circles and I do women's empowerment and I do women's boudoir photography for their empowerment. And then there's men that they're like, oh my God, that's so cool, and for women. And it's like, yeah, dude, but I'm sure you have something. It's not that I'm trying to heal everybody, but it's like you're human. I'm sure you have things that you need to deal with. But then there's some, which is going to be the next question or point. There's some men that are so they want to be the manly man that even though they know, and this all makes sense, they are still batting it out and trying to manly fix everything.
Hmm.
Obviously, they nobody gets help when they don't want to get help. So I'm not, the question isn't going towards that. But do you find that in the world with the things that you're doing, do you find that maybe there's a chance that more even of those men can soften up to the point to be just vulnerable enough to come and enter something like this? Because what you offer is like the mix of the martial arts and a mix of all. It's not just come sit, meditate, and let's, smell the sage. It's a manly thing. So do you think that these manly mans are going to come to a point that there's going to be a lot more of them?
I feel like when we kind of mix everything up a little bit, instead of keeping it what is expected, like the stereotypical,
Mhm.
uh, come do some yoga and breathe and stretch and heal, uh, or come use a gun, use a weapon, uh, pretend to kill something, get back to your tribalism and create some type of breakthrough, and then be vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
in a safe way, obviously, not in a dangerous way. But I think that's really what we need is men need to feel like men. They need to be encouraged to be like men, not encouraged to be afraid.
Okay, let's touch on that because for the person that will listen to that out of context, they're going to be like, okay, for a man to feel like a man, this is what we've been taught. So ironic, you're telling us what you're telling us not to do.
Hmm.
But it's the we can all have, not me, I have a little girl, but men can all have a little boy inside of them that does like doing the quote unquote manly things, and you get to do that. And you don't have to, which is what we're talking about, you don't have to shy down and be soft in order
Yeah.
to get your emotions out. Is that what you're aiming at? Like, did I translate it correctly?
Yes, you did. You did very well.
Thank you.
So the idea isn't to say if you do these things, you're a man. The idea is to not be afraid that there are men that are big and rugged, yet they're afraid to be vulnerable and feel emotions. And then there are men that aren't big and rugged, and maybe they have shied away from any type of physical violence or anything like that their whole life. But they do have the capacity inside of them to be men, and they're just afraid.
Hmm.
So
And
I
it could
feel
also
like when
be,
we do that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, 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 sorry. I was just gonna say, what I'm thinking is it could also be the fact that some weren't taught to be men, or some saw what other men were doing and they so did not like that for whatever reason, and they're completely against being that way. Because it happens with women too. I mean, all of us, again, we're human, we have a role model, whether we like it or not, in our actual parents and our friends' parents and TV shows and movies, things that we know. And our mind is such a beautiful fucker. I'm gonna go ahead and say it because it is. It's like we perceive the things that we do and then we interpret them based on our feelings, our perception, our time and place, our everything. So what you and I see in the same movie, I can be translating in a completely different way. Imagine life and quote unquote what we call reality. So it's a very interesting thing that the same thing for the women. Stereotypical women should be soft and delicate and this and that, and men should be tough and rugged and protectors. There's such extremes and such, what's the word I'm looking for? Like it just because of whatever sex you are, you have like all these. implanted responsibilities. And if you're not feeling it, then you're the one that's wrong. And then we wonder why our society is the way that it is, right?
Mm. Yeah, the shame. When you don't fit the mold, then feel shame. And I think that's really what we have to get away from is shaming each other into a role or a position that you have to fit this identity or else you're not doing life right or you're doing it wrong.
Mhm.
And instead of just different. And I think that's the idea we have to get back to is just be okay with different instead of right or wrong.
And I think that applies to a lot of different things because, again, business marketing wise, it's great that you're doing what you're doing because you're unique and you stand out from all the other coaches and consultants trying to do healing and helping because not everybody mixes in weapons and, martial arts training. But it's that. It's you willing, willing to be different in the sense of, well, this is what worked for me. Maybe I can help somebody else see it differently. That, yeah, we don't have to go sit in a yoga pose and like be different doesn't mean anything except here's another way you can try it, see if it helps.
Yeah. And I feel like yoga and meditation are extremely necessary, especially with martial arts. So it's not to say that they are separate. It's just to kind of shine light on the fact that men, when it comes to healing, they don't have to associate healing as sitting still and stretching and breathing. Could easily be something extremely physical and challenging that makes you feel empowered. Like a man, like your ancients, your heritage 1,000 years ago when they were living off the land with a spear 2,000 years ago.
I thank God every time I did not live that or I don't have to live that now because I would not be able to hunt anything. I'm very thankful for supermarkets and farmers. Sorry, squirrel. Okay. So and yes, and that's the beautiful thing about being able to do things differently and open yourself up because again, our minds are trained in such a construct and pattern. Sometimes we need, all of us need such a shift for the neuroscience in our brain and the chemicals and the thinking and the neuron and the whole process to be able to do, oh, okay, this is different. And we don't keep repeating that story, or at least it breaks us open enough to, okay, I can hear you. I'm vulnerable enough. What do you got? Because I need to do something different. And I think the point of all this is yes, we're all going through things. We've all gone through things. We will continue to go through things because that's called life. And like you said way at the beginning, you're not the only person in the world that, had a divorce or had a breakup or had something when we feel like the foundation has been ripped out from underneath us and we're left like, am I kneeling? Am I standing? Am I crying? Or am I in fetal position? But it's knowing that there's so much more to do even before we get to that point. Because again, a breakup, a divorce, and anything can happen at any stage of somebody's life. It's not reacting after the fact, but learning how to take action from a calm, healthy state of mind, right?
Absolutely. I feel like that really defines us as people, is how we respond to tragedy.
And there's so many beautiful things. So, is there a way, looking at my notes, because it's going to be a tricky question,
Mm.
is there a way that men, I'm actually even thinking, we're talking men specifically, but it could be women that are also going through the same thing, who feel that they've always had to be strong and in survival mode for whatever reason. Is there a way that you can share with us a tip or something of how can they learn to soften up just a little bit to be vulnerable, even if it's for them, for themselves, and not tell anybody, but how can they say, okay, I'll give this thing a try. What do I need to do?
Mm. Yeah. So that was one of the hardest things for me to learn in this past year and a half was how do we slow down and be vulnerable? And the one thing that I can say worked for me was starting every day in silence. for at least 15 minutes and not think about anything. And when you do think of something, try to capture the thought and redirect yourself back to silence. And if you can, sit in silence. Then reassure yourself with what you're grateful for. And I am statements, something
Okay.
that is empowering. I would say to myself, I am loved, I am important, and I am a soldier of light.
You can tell my personality by now, so I'm just going to be open with it. You don't have to share if you don't need to, if you don't want to. But I think it's important. Was it easy for you to say that to yourself and believe it when you first started saying those statements? Was that easy to believe I am loved, I am important?
It wasn't easy, it was necessary. Uh, it was something I had to force myself to say to myself, especially in the mirror. I had to look myself in the eye and tell myself. And then I had to really look into the darkness. That was most important. And that's probably another thing I could recommend is go deep into the darkness of yourself, the evil.
Okay, now we're just diving in there. So yes, because I know of a lot of men that one specifically would always say, I don't want to go there. I know how much darkness I have inside me, and I don't want to be that. So that is something scary for somebody to do. How do you get through that? Besides just doing it, don't tell me, just go ahead and do it and stick through it because the mind is more powerful.
Yeah, it is.
So, how do you do that?
The scary thing is the feelings. So it's not the actual going into the darkness of your mind and the evil. It's what you feel when you get there. That's what people are afraid of, at least for myself, because you might feel comfortable there. And that scares people. Because if you feel comfortable in the darkness, maybe you won't come back and you will become it. And I suppose that is a choice. But for myself, I found that going into the darkness and feeling it every day, all of those desires and the hatred and the anger, it allowed me to feel it all. And the more I felt it, the less impact it had on me.
Hmm.
So I let go of it.
So, I have a saying that I picked up from somebody, so I don't know where it actually came from, but it's like, feel the feels.
Yeah,
And you just touched on that in a second because none of us want to feel anger and pain and etc. So, from a holistic sense, I always say that we're talking heads because a lot of people do not want to do anything to do from the head down. They only want to live in their head, meaning the thinking, the thoughts, the logical, the rational. But no, 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 no. I don't want to feel that. And it's not even the darkness. It's, I've been hurt before. I don't know how to feel love. I don't want to feel love. I don't want to feel pain. I have anger. I don't like feeling anger. And we repress it. And we become, again, so disconnected from even the entirety of who we are, from our own self, that that could be the darkness because we've been so disconnected from all that pain that we pushed inside of us and never wanted to deal with, but we know consciously or unconsciously it's still there, right?
absolutely. It's always there. I think that's the scary part is that people like to deny it and they like to pretend that they're entirely a good person because of some idea that they have or the idea has them. And once you kind of come to terms with the fact that you're not a good person through and through, you are also an evil person, and you accept it, then you actually get to be a good person by choice rather than by default.
Hmm. So define for me what you mean by being a good person or being evil.
Mm. So, an evil person versus a good person, that is a good question. I would say they are both one and the same. A good person is an evil person that chooses not to be evil, whereas an evil person chooses to just continue being evil.
Okay, but okay, the reason I keep asking is because for me there isn't. I try to stick away from the labels good and evil in the sense of we have such labels and beliefs for both of them. If you're good, that means you're this, this, and this. If you're evil, it means this and this and this. And the reason I bring it up is because number one, the more attention to something we give it, the more charge we give it, of course. But the fact that somebody would say, I'm evil, and you really dig deep and, okay, why do you say that? Why do you say that? Why do you say that? And it's not that they're evil, they're just having emotions, they're
Mm,
having thoughts, they're having all these different things that in their mind, they're not being good. So, like, let's say, for example, the little boy, just an example. If mom gets pissed off at the little boy because he did something and, she screams at him and like chaos explodes because we're parents, it happens. Um, the little boy in his mind could think, I'm a bad boy, I'm a bad person. And you grow up with that, and to the point that it's like, well, I've been doing this, I've been doing this, I hurt my mom, I hurt this, and then I grew up and I hurt the girlfriend. I must be an evil person.
mm,
But see what I'm getting at? It's kind of like there's so many definitions and labels to the word evil
yeah.
that when we talk about, in my case, when we talk about a good person or a bad person, well, what do you define a good person? Because maybe what you define as a, not you, but just in general, whatever the person defines as a good person might be freaking evil to me. Like, you actually think that's good? Like, really? Let
Yeah, it
me
is
get away
subjective.
from you. Right. Like, that's not my version, so I will step away. But and that's the thing that I want people to understand from this conversation. We have so many thoughts in our head that who are we to say this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is evil, except how we feel about them for us, right?
Mm,
Or
yeah,
I mean, not right, but that's my perception of it.
yeah. I would agree that depends on the perspective. And I think we can all agree that harming others is an evil act, whether that's physically or emotionally or psychologically. Doing harm is an evil act, it's not a good act. So it could be defined, at least on common grounds, that evil is simply the act of doing evil rather than a feeling or a thought, because we all have evil feelings and thoughts sometimes from reactions or stimulus or whatever, trauma. But if we act on it, then I guess that depends if you're good or evil.
Yeah, and it could be because, and again, everything is perception because I'm thinking about it as we speak. I have literally told my daughter, she's, old now, not old, she'll kill me. She's 20. Um, I have literally told her since she was a little girl, mom plays nice, but if somebody crosses the line with you, they will see, I mean, I will end up in jail because I would murder them. And that is an evil thought, but I can feel in my motherly nature of somebody hurts my child, the line's crossed for me. Is that good or bad? I don't know, but that is an instinct reaction. And you're right. We all have thoughts like that. Am I acting on it? Have I acted on it? Thank God, no. Like it's nothing has ever happened, and God forbid it does. But we all have the thoughts. And again, it's well, how bad was your thought? I mean, I can tell you I would go murder the person, but I'm not thinking I would go chop them up with like a little knife and cut them and make sure they suffer and they torture. Like that's taking it to the next extreme.
Yeah.
But it depends on the mood the day that happens. But okay, we're running out of time, but I did want people to follow you and it's super interesting because I do support the idea and I love the fact of the idea that obviously women can help women in a different way that men can help men. So where can people reach out to you, specifically men or specifically women that would love for their man to be able to be like, okay, maybe he'll give this guy a shot because of the weapons, because of the martial arts, you know. Um, where can they reach out to you?
So I'm available on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and LinkedIn, just as my name, Micah Yott. I also have a website. That's thesilentscreams.com, which you can find all of my work there, essentially with books, graphic novels. Uh, I have a group on Facebook called Push with Love. That is essentially the space where I invite people to meet and we discuss recovery techniques for trauma. Mostly, and this is just from my experience, that when we share our trauma in a safe, judgment-free zone, it's not enough. We have to also focus on techniques for recovery. We cannot just sit and share pain and think that's going to heal us. And that's just my experience. I feel like if we meet, if you are interested in recovery, it isn't going to be just we're going to sit and talk about pain. We're going to sit and talk about how we can fix ourselves. That way we can become the best version.
Very nice. Thank you so much for your time today, for literally what you're doing. Um, I mean this wholeheartedly. Congrats on doing it for yourself because I know that it's not easy. And when anybody's life gets turned upside down for whatever reason, being able to turn yourself up, pick yourself up, figure out what you did, and then turn around and help others and be like, hey, I'm vulnerable enough to tell you how vulnerable I was when I went through this. It's a big thing. So thank you for sharing your story with us and for what you're doing.
Thank you.
And we'll talk soon, everybody. Bye.